go over some history of the U.S. first in the PowerPoints, and then we're going to be looking at value orientation theory and how the U.S. relates to value orientation theory. This theory is inherent in all cultures, and what the 5 elements of the value orientation theory include: human being versus nature orientation, activity orientation, time orientation, human nature orientation, and relational orientation. In other words, how do each of these orientations relate in culture? So looking at just some history to bring us up to speed, the origins of the U.S. cultural patterns, as you can see, pre-16th century, Native Americans, influence of various groups, in particular certain Native American groups, European Enlightenment, foundation of governmental law, government and law focus on individual liberty, regional differences resulting from immigration, creates a society of diversity, not sameness, from its very beginning. And Turner said the frontier mentality created a forward-thinking people looking for greener pastures as people came to the United States. So this is highlights from your book. Also, communication markers by region. Researcher Anderson suggests differences among regions along 3 areas: verbal control and dominance. Those from New England are more likely to be introverts. Those in the mid-Atlantic are not particularly talkative or verbally dominant. Association and proximity. People from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana visit more neighbors and rate friends higher than do people in other regions. And also based on the research from Anderson, arousal and activation. Those from New England employ a non-dramatic and reserved communication style. Very plain. The South and the Northwest are slow and more relaxed. Forces toward the development of a dominant culture. Okay, so let's look at the history that brought us up to where we are today. Historians have charted these events as shaping dominant U.S. culture that brought us to our culture today. The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825, okay, and along with this was the emergence of New York as the financial and corporate capital of an integrated industrial complex. The defeat of the South and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that established national citizenship over state citizenship. The 13th Amendment officially abolished and continues to prohibit slavery, just as a refresher of what these amendments say or mean. The 14th is one of the post-Civil War amendments, and it's intended to secure rights for former slaves. And the 15th states that the governments in the U.S. may not prevent a citizen from voting based on a citizen's race. Development, as we move on in history, development of Theodore Roosevelt's new nationalism that provided the intellectual foundations for an activist national government. And lastly, the passage of the Immigration Restriction Act of 1924, which permitted a degree of blending the population. What this act said is that the annual number of immigrants who could be admitted from any country to 2% of the number of the people from that country who were already living in the U.S. in 1890. It's down from the 3% cap set by the Immigration Restriction Act. So this limited the number of annual immigrants who can be admitted from any country to 2% of the number of people from that country who who were already living in the U.S. So that's what the Immigration Restriction Act meant. Forces toward the development of a dominant culture. Let's continue here. The development of radio and television, which nationalized politics and popular culture. Mass communication. The automobile and interstate highway system that made the country internally mobile. This happened in the mid-1950s with President Eisenhower. And the Great Depression, World War II, and the onset of the Cold War, which is dated to be from 1947 to 1991, all increased the need for a strong, centralized national government. Let's look at the gist or the thrust of this particular chapter, which is value orientation theory. And our researchers find and found or suggest that cultures develop a unique position on these 5 orientations. The 5 orientations, and we're going to look at this, how it works with the U.S., is what is a human being's relationship to nature. Okay, so human or nature orientation. What's the modality of human activity? What's the temporal focus of human life? In other words, time. How do we deal with time in the U.S.? What is the character of innate human nature? And lastly, the relationship of the individual to others. Relational connection. Human being nature orientation. Okay, human being and nature orientation. The U.S. is the most religious of the world's industrialized states. The most religious of the world's industrialized states. People in the U.S. make a clear distinction between human life and nature, placing a higher value on human life compared to nature. This is our orientation in our culture. Remember, we have 5, and we're looking at how it relates to the U.S. People have a strong faith in scientific method to solve problems. So it's not an act of God. It's not voodoo. It's not a fluke. It's scientific method. Much of the world's attributes attributes the U.S. as being materialistic. So the U.S. is viewed as being materialistic. There's a belief that possessions are important to folks who live in the U.S. What do you think? Modality, which means pattern of human activity. Activity orientation refers to the use of time for self-expression and play, self-improvement and development and work. Most visitors who come to the United States, who visit the U.S., feel it's a very hectic, busy culture. People in the U.S. identify themselves with their occupation, with their work. I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm a salesperson. Okay, where in other countries, work is a means to get money, but not your self-identity. Okay, in the U.S., we identify with what we do with our work. We define ourselves with our occupation. It becomes our identity. And again, in other cultures, this is not so. It's more on what you do in your free time that identifies who you are, not necessarily what you do for a means of money. Progress and change are good things and often synonymous in the U.S. And efficiency and practicality is part of the busy culture, with emphasis put on time and our use of it. So we're a very busy, hectic culture. Temporal, related to or limited by time, focus of human life. again, we hear the cliche in the U.S., time equals money, okay? We consider one's time as a commodity, okay, as a resource. And again, cultures look differently at time. We looked at chronemics. We looked at polychronic and monochronic cultures. Remember, polychronic cultures do many things at the same time. Where mono, one, doing one thing at the time. So we live in a polychronic culture. And because of that, time is considered a commodity. It's considered a resource. Time is considered linear, okay? It's a timeline. It has a past, present, and future, resulting in less appreciation for the present because our focus is always on the progress. You know, you've heard again the saying, enjoy the journey. It's not the destination. Enjoy getting there. So in a sense, that's what we need to be reminded of more so. Character of innate human nature. Okay, innate human nature. U.S. history of Puritan ancestry lends its credence to the idea that people are born evil but have the capacity for good through discipline. Newer views are a mixed people, are born with a mixture of potential of good and evil. So the newer views, past Puritan views were that people are born evil, but then will have the capacity to be good. But now we say people are born with a mixture of good and evil. Rationality, people act within reason, again, consistent with scientific method. And mutability, subject to change. People are subject to change. Education can change people. Prison is for rehabilitation. That's our belief in our culture. Relationships of individuals to others. In the U.S., people tend to define their self in terms of roles and responsibilities in society, work being the dominant role. Remember, we identify ourselves with our work, with who we are. I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm a lawyer. Individualism is the most persistent and consistent characteristic of the U.S., okay? Hyper-individualism is withdrawing into individual private shells. Okay, so U.S. is considered to be very individualist society culture compared to a collective culture. Self-motivation is part of individualism. Individuals should set their own goals, pursue them independently rather than favor group decisions. That's an element of the U.S. culture. Again, hyper-individualism. We're concerned about ourselves. We should set our own goals, pursue them independently rather than favoring group decisions. Remember, individualist, collectivist cultures. We're individualist. Relationship of individuals to others. Social organization refers to the way society is organized. Specific example is we have a separation of church and state. Equality, an important cultural myth in the U.S. And we say this, that yes, we say all men and women are created equal. However, do we truly have equality in our culture, in our society? We know we have classes, different types of classes, and some we strive for equality, but we're truly maybe not there. And people in the U.S. tend to emphasize conformity to modern norms or what is in. There seems to be a trend that people in the U.S. are more concerned with what is in our culture. Okay, that's it for Chapter 8. Have a good day.